Sacramento is really pretty. Y'all knew that already. I was new to this. So hi, I'm Erin McKean. I'm going to show you how to build an API in 20 minutes or less with Loopback. And so how many people have used Loopback before? You don't count. You count, sir. How many people? So just to get a baseline. So our goal today for this API is to go on Jeopardy, to beat IBM's Watson, to win a lot of money. And in order to do this, we're going to build an API, duh. And to do that, we need some data. And we're going to do it. It's very easy using Loopback. And because I'm a JavaScript developer, I'm using Mongo. Your choice of database is between you and your software architect, but lots of JavaScript developers use Mongo. So anyway, it's easy to make an API. It's not easy to win on Jeopardy. So let's talk a little bit about Loopback. Loopback is a tool for rapidly generating REST APIs with Node. How many people in here use Node? Awesome, we're in the right place. Sometimes nobody's hands go up, and then I'm like, why are you in this room? So Loopback is open source. It's maintained by IBM. Sam and I often sit in a large room with the people making Loopback, so if you have suggestions, pass them along. It's based on Express. How many people here have used Express? Yeah, Express is what got me into Loopback. I enjoy Express. Loopback is free to use, and although Loopback is supported by IBM, you can deploy a Loopback application anywhere you can deploy a Node application on any cloud service, although we encourage the use of Bluemix, but it's not necessary. But the #1 reason to use Loopback, in my opinion, is speed of development, and that's what I'm going to try and show you tonight. So when I talk to people about why Loopback, I often use the metaphor that Loopback is like cake mix for APIs. Basically, you add your database and you stir and you have an API. How many of you like cake? Keep your hand up if you like making cake as much as you like eating cake. Some people are good bakers. Some people really enjoy handcrafting their APIs. But more people, I think, like to use APIs than like to make APIs. So even though Loopback is like cake mix, it doesn't mean that you have to have a boring cake. You can extend Loopback in a bunch of different ways and make as fancy a cake as you would like. It just lets you make a fancy cake faster. So I talked about winning Jeopardy, and that's because I have a data set on my laptop that is over 200,000 Jeopardy questions in JSON. Some dude on Reddit scraped them, and it is the most grateful I have ever been to a dude on Reddit. But it's a really, it's a really nice data set, and I actually found out about this data set from a wonderful tiny letter called Data is Plural. And if you like playing around with interesting, unusual, open, and free data sets, I highly recommend subscribing to Data is Plural. If you just Google Data is Plural tiny letter, you will find the sign-up sheet. He does not spam you, and the data sets are always fascinating. So I went ahead and loaded all 200,000 plus questions into Mongo, and it's on my laptop. So in order to use Loopback, there are a couple of setup things that I'm going to elide at this point, but you should probably know how to do these things already. If you don't know, please come up afterwards and ask me. I would be happy to show you. But you should have Node installed. You should have NPM installed. Loopback does not support Node versions before 4. You install the Loopback CLI. And if you have data in Mongo, you should have it up and running in Mongo. If you have data somewhere else, you should have that database running. OK, so this is where things get fun. So let's do this. Yeah, that's the terminal I want. OK, so I have installed the Loopback CLI. And so I'm just going to type lb app. Is this big enough? Can people see it? And then you get your friendly yeoman generator. And it's going to ask me, what do I want to call this application? So let's call this SacJS. I'm going to put it in the same directory. I'm going to use version 3 of Loopback, which is the current, most up-to-date long-term support version. And I'm going to make an empty server because I want everybody to be able to win on Jeopardy, so I'm not going to add any auth or user controls. Just going to have a plain old API. And now the friendly wombats at NPM are going to install a bunch of stuff, and which just reminds me I didn't connect to any kind of internet whatsoever. Let's do that now because it's not going to do anything until I do that. This is going to slow the wombats down considerable. All right. Everybody just clicks through these, right? Nobody ever reads the terms of use. All right. If this doesn't work, I did actually bring a pocket internet, so. I did several times. All right. So let's get rid of that. Let's see if that slows the wombats down at all, or if they're going to pick up where they left off. All right, that doesn't seem like it's working, so let's just do npm install. And now the wombats seem way speedier. Let's just see if that actually did anything. Okay, so that's scaffolded an app. And if you can see here, we've got a client folder, we've got a server folder, we've got a package.json. That's basically all we need. If we just want to peek into the server folder real quick, we can see a bunch of stuff that we'll look at in a bit. But so LB app scaffolded an app, and now I want to connect it to a data source. And that is, this command will be a big surprise to everybody, LB data source. Oh, you know what? I'm in the wrong directory, which I do a lot. Let's do it here. And let's call it Mongo. Now, Loopback can connect to just about any database you can think of, including, big surprise, IBM's DB2 database. But Redis, Mongo, MySQL, Postgres, Oracle, anything you can think of, and actually a Cassandra connector was just released. The Mongo connector is supported by the folks at IBM. There are also other connectors that are community supported. For instance, the Elasticsearch connector is a community supported connector. It's actually pretty kick-ass. But what this means is, even if you want to connect to a database or a backend service that's not supported by Loopback currently, there are instructions for how to write your own connector. Because I am a hater of inefficiency, I use a clipboard manager. How many people here use a clipboard manager? All of you should have your hands up. A clipboard manager will save you hours of time over the course of your life. It will save you from repetitive strain disorder. It will make your presentations go a lot faster when you've claimed to be able to do an API in 20 minutes. I use copy and paste. There are plenty of them out there that are free. I like to pay for software because then people might pay me to write software. It's like the circle of software life. I encourage you to pay for software. But anyway, with a clipboard manager, I can easily save things like this connection string, and then I don't have to enter the host or the port or the user or the password or anything that's in that string. And now we're going to go back to our friendly wombats at npm, and they're going to install some more stuff for us. So you can think of a Loopback application as like a three-legged stool. LB app scaffolds the application, LB data source adds your data source, and the third leg of this stool is the model. So you can create a model straight from the command line. So the worst part of doing a Jeopardy demonstration is spelling Jeopardy over and over again. So Jeopardy question is our model name. We've connected to data source, so let's connect that here. I'm going to use the persisted model because even though I can't necessarily foresee a future where I'm going to write more Jeopardy questions and save them to the database, I want to keep that option open. I'm definitely going to expose it via the API because that's kind of the whole point. Jeopardy question takes a regular English plural, so I don't need to put a custom in there. And I'm going to put this model that I'm creating in a common folder because I might someday write a client for this API and I might want to have access to the model. Pigs might also fly, but you know. Okay, so what kind of properties did we see in that data that we had? Well, Jeopardy questions have a question property, which is a string, and it's required, but there's no default value. They also have an answer, which are also strings, also required, no default. And let's add, there were more properties, but let's just add one more in the interest of time. Categories, string, required. And then we're done. At this point, if I wired up everything correctly, we actually have a whole working API. Oh, and no, I don't. So what do we do? I think probably we have an install problem from the wombats. Yeah, that looks better. This is why you should always connect to the internet first. How about now? Now we have a working API. And so I'm going to refresh this so that you know it wasn't there before, because you can see the last one was called Jeopardy Mongo. This one's called SacJS. All of these endpoints were created automatically from everything that I did on the command line. That's it. I'm not going to get all of them because trying to load 200,000 questions in the browser is a really bad idea. I'm going to try to find just one question. And let's see if I hooked it up. There it is. So that was 7 minutes, including some wombat trouble. So it really is that fast to make an API with Loopback. It probably took 2 or 3 orders of magnitude for that dude on Reddit to scrape the data as it took for this API to be created with Loopback. This is pretty much why I love Loopback. But there's way more that you can do with it. So let's go back to the slides real quick. Phew. There's lots more that you can do with Loopback. That's just the most basic thing. You have some data, you want to have an API to access that data really quickly, and you don't want to spend a lot of time futzing around, because this is why Loopback is great for prototyping, because it lets you get all the boilerplate and CRUD APIs out of the way so you can focus on your business logic. So you can do all sorts of other cool stuff. You can add custom ID values, models, method, data source, and operation hooks. So basically at every stage of the Loopback cycle, you can add a function that says, do something now. For instance, if you wanted to, say, get user objects from your database, but you wanted to make sure that the password property was never passed back to anybody, you could write a hook that says, once you get this user object, delete the password property before you pass it to anything else. You can have boot scripts that run when Loopback starts. You can hide endpoints and more. So actually, do you want to see how to do a custom method? Let's do that. That was a trick question. I was going to do it no matter what y'all said. Okay, so let's kill this for a second. I've been trying to use Visual Studio Code a little bit more, but then I also got this really nice theme for Sublime. So we created a model from the command line. This is what it looked like. And Loopback model also creates this JavaScript file for you. And it's just a plain old JavaScript file. You can put whatever functions that you might want in there. And if I'm really serious about going on Jeopardy, which I'm not actually, but if I were, I wouldn't want to just find one Jeopardy question all the time, because find one just returns the first one from the database. So that question was about Copernicus. I would end up knowing that question really well and never learn any of the other ones. So why don't we add a find random, which I just happen to have in my clipboard manager, which you should also have. And there are 2 parts to this. That was not the right one. So you can just write plain old JavaScript in this plain old JavaScript file, and that means that you can access the features of whatever data source that you're connecting to. So in this case, Mongo has this really cool aggregate feature where you can say, okay, take this entire collection of Jeopardy questions and get me a sample of size 1, which is essentially Mongo just picking you out something at random. So this function turns into a new endpoint and a new API for you. And then you can use this code from line 17 on to add the OpenAPI spec description that adds it to that really nice browser explorer. So if I save this, and we run it again. Let's refresh here. Now we should have a random endpoint now. And if everything got wired up correctly, we'll get a random question that is not about Copernicus, which is great. And it's kind of hard to hit both buttons and see it at the same time, but randomness without really having to do very much. So it's pretty easy to extend Loopback to make, remote methods, to add whatever business logic that you need after, and you get all of those, all of these other endpoints for free. So let's have a couple more slides. And so once you have all that, of course, you could build a front end if you're so inclined. I'm not so inclined. And I want to talk just for a couple seconds about why use a framework like Loopback. I don't know if you follow big important computing people on Twitter the way I do, but every once in a while some big important computer person says, oh, it's not real code unless you lovingly handcraftingly move the electrons from place to place on the actual disk. And I think that there is a real point to be made that you should understand how your code works. You should understand the basic principles. You should understand JavaScript. But at the same time, I don't feel the need to reinvent my oven from scratch every time I bake a cake. I like to use cake mix. I like to use my oven. I don't want to build it all from scratch. And I think that frameworks have a lot going for them. For example, frameworks make the implicit explicit. Because you're using a framework, you have to think about, oh, why did these people do it this way? Oh, now I understand. Where if you were writing your own code from scratch, you might make a whole lot of assumptions that the next person down the line looking at your code might not share. But with a framework, that stuff is all set out in the open. It also helps you create a shared mental model. If you're working on this code with a bunch of other people, the layout is all the same. You're all thinking about the code in the same way, which is sometimes something that when you're sharing your code with other people, you have to make a point of doing. And frameworks kind of short-circuit that process. You build an ecosystem. There are so many Loopback questions on Stack Overflow and in the Loopback Google group. It promotes code reuse because, of course, you're reusing Loopback instead of writing it from scratch. All those questions on Stack Overflow and in the Google group let you learn from other people's mistakes. I vastly prefer learning from other people's mistakes than from my own mistakes. Other people's mistakes are way more entertaining than my own. Mine are dumb. Theirs are fascinating. And Loopback and other frameworks, they help you build faster. So if someone tells you that you're not a real developer because you use a framework like Express or like Loopback or Koa or Happy or anything that you might care to use, I think that the answer to that is that real developers make things that are safe and stable and maintainable and that users want and need. And how you get there is up to you. So I did mention a bunch of Loopback resources. The docs at loopback.io are really good. There's a Google group that's pretty active, Stack Overflow, and of course IBM Developer Works. If you have questions, I am happy to either answer them or get you to the right person who can answer them. Hit me up on Twitter. Strong Loop also has a pretty strong Twitter account, and we do put a lot of code repos up on GitHub at that URL. And thank you guys so much. Really appreciate your attention.